Ave Maris Stella.
Hello and welcome back to Vatican II in a Year. This is your host, Father Matthew Schneider. I am a priest of the Legionaries of Christ and a theology professor. This is a podcast from the StarQuest Production Network at sqpn.com. Today we're on day 212 and we're covering Apostolic Axiostatum 9 to 10 on lay apostolate in the world. If you want to follow along, we have a reading plan and more details at sqpn.com/Vatican or frmatthewlc.com/Vatican. Yesterday, we talked about how charitable works are important to apostolate that the Church has always recognized and which is now becoming more global. Today, we're going to start chapter 3, which is the various fields of apostolate. And a summary is that lay people carry a wide variety of apostolate, but this is within the their wider vocation in union with church structures like parishes. So we get right into it. Paragraph 9 has no subparagraphs. So the summary is that lay people of both sexes carried apostolate in a wide spectrum of fields. Let's read it. The laity carried out their manifold apostolate both in the church and in the world. In both areas, there are various opportunities for apostolic activity. We wish to list here the more important fields of apostolic activity, namely church communities, the family, youth, the social milieu, and national and international levels. Since in our time, women have had an ever more active share in the whole family life of society, it is important that they participate more widely also in the various fields of the Church's apostolate. So as noted, the lay apostolate is in the world. It's not so much in the church, it's in the world. We are in the world, but we are not of it. And that is important for lay people who are more in the world than someone like myself, who is both a priest and a religious. And it lists a whole bunch of areas here, notes many areas, right? So church communities, you have our parish, you have the diocese, things like that. You have the family. Once you're married, that is the first key of your vocation, to be with your spouse, to be with your kids, help them grow, help them flourish. And then youth, because there is an importance that we give to the young people because they're the ones in the stages of formation of their lives, in teen years, even in their 20s, and even in the little kids. Next, it talks about the social milieu, cultural groups, social groups, both things like media and wider social things, and the local cultural or social groups, the PTA, the community organization, things like that. They all need to be changed with the gospel. Finally, it talks about national, international levels. Politics is not inherently evil. You can do a lot of good in politics if you are set in the right way. And that's really what the church is asking lay people to be those great politicians who really change the world for Jesus, make it a better place. Finally, it notes the idea that this is for women as well, not just men. Obviously, this is a big thing of the modern world, and I think we all understand that. So moving on to paragraph 10, it has 3 subparagraphs. A is apostle within the wider vocation of lay people in the church. B is about the parish being the model for lay clerical collaboration. C is about lay apostolate should not be limited by parish or diocesan boundaries. So that's what we're going to cover. So moving right along to 10a, as sharers in the role of Christ as priest, prophet, and king, the laity have their work cut out for them in the life and activity of the church. Their activity is so necessary within the church communities that without it, the lay apostolate of the apostolate of pastors is often unable to achieve its full effectiveness. In the manner of men and women who help Paul in spreading the gospel, confer Acts 18, Romans and 16, the laity, with the right apostolic attitude, supply what is lacking to their brethren and refresh the spirit of pastors and the rest of the faithful, confer 1 Corinthians 16. Strengthened by active participation in the liturgical life of their community, they are eager to do the share of their apostolic works of the community. They bring to the church people who perhaps are far removed from it, earnestly cooperate in preparing the word of God, especially by means of catechetical instruction, and offer their special skills to make care of souls and the administration of the temporalities of the church more efficient and effective. So this paragraph starts with the idea of the common priesthood, the priest, prophet, and king. We build each other up. It builds up the church. I think we covered that in a little more detail a few days ago, so I'm not going to go into it in detail here. Now, the second aspect is this mutual building up between lay people and priests, that priests build up and strengthen lay people through the liturgy so that they can do apostolate, and the lay apostolate is needed for clerical fruitfulness. If I just do all my apostolate and don't involve lay people at all, it's not as much. I actually had to interrupt this recording as I got a phone call from someone who works in a diocesan office, for example, and they do a lot they're a layperson. They do a lot to build up the diocese and help the diocese and all those types of things. And it's great. It's great to have lay people doing that. That helps our vocation as priests, our apostles as priests so much. So then it talks about the early church, right? With St. Paul, we have this idea of the lay apostolate there, where people are helping Paul, who is an apostle, a priest, and they are building him up, and he is building them up. And finally, it notes about people could reach areas we priests and religious often can't go. I'm not going to be able to be in the CEO. I'm not going to be able to be the top cancer researcher or things like that. There are people who work at Stanford or at Harvard or things like that where you have to be such an expert in some field where, having all my studies in theology, I'm not going to be an expert in those fields. So moving on to 10b, it talks about the parish, and it should be the model of lay clerical collaboration. Obviously, this is talking about ideal. We need to move towards that ideal. Obviously, most of us probably know of places where this ideal is not lived out, but this is the ideal we're going to work with. So 10b. The parish offers an obvious example of the apostle on the community level, inasmuch as it brings together the many human differences within its boundaries and merges them into the universality of the church. The laity should accustom themselves to working in the parish in union with their priests, bringing to the church community their own and the world's problems, as well as questions concerning human salvation, all of which should examine and resolve by deliberation in common. As far as possible, the laity ought to provide help, full collaboration for every apostolic and missionary undertaking sponsored by their local parish. One of the things about the parish is you have this wide swath of people. You have one guy who's a scientist, and one guy who's a businessman, and one guy who's a salesman, and one guy who's a construction worker, and things like that. And they all have their different talents. I remember when my grandfather died, and the priest was given the information for his funeral, he was kind of surprised how much my grandfather had done in chemical research in his past, right? My grandfather, who was a great chemical researcher, Chemical Institute of Canada, things like that. But this priest, who had known him for the last 5-6 years of his life, just knew him as an old guy who was at the parish helping out and doing some basic things. That is the kind of thing where you have this wide swath. And we need to work together, lay people and clerics. We need to help people find salvation. We help them through all the different means of the parish to come towards Jesus, to come to find salvation. Now, obviously, laity also should help with parish initiatives. Finally, moving on to 10c, it talks about how lay apostles should not be limited to parishes or diocesan boundaries. And this is important to talk about this wider spectrum that we have in the modern world, where there's more interconnected world, much more since Vatican II. This is talking about 60 years ago, and you realize how limited the interconnections were there. I remember my mom talking about how when she was 2-3 hours away at university, it would cost an arm and a leg for her just to call back to her parents regularly. And so she didn't actually get to call with them often. And now I'm much further away and I can call my parents for free. So that just shows, how that changed from those time frames. So let's read 10c. They should develop an ever-increasing appreciation of their own diocese, of which the parish is a kind of cell, ever ready at their pastor's invitation to participate in diocesan projects. Indeed, to fulfill the needs of cities and rural areas, they should not limit their cooperation to the parochial diocesan boundaries, but strive to extend it to interparochial, interdiocesan, national, and international levels. This is constantly becoming all the more necessary because the daily increase in mobility of populations, reciprocal relationships, and means of communication no longer allow any sector of society to remain closed in upon itself. Thus, they should be concerned about the needs of people of God dispersed throughout the world. They should especially make missionary activity their own by giving material, even personal assistance. It is a duty and honor for Christians to return to God a part of their good things that they receive from Him. So this is the idea. We start moving towards the wider things for the parish and diocese. Obviously, as Christians, as Catholics, we should feel at home in our parish and our diocese. But it's not just that. It keeps expanding to wider fields here. Interdiocesan, national, international, things like that. We have all these different relationships. In most states, there's a state association of Catholic dioceses that work for political things in the state level and the state house. whether it's the California, Connecticut, they're usually called the Connecticut Catholic Conference or the California Catholic Conference, something like that. And now that the world is more interconnected, there's more interrelation. We have to concern for the whole world. And it talks about giving for missionary work. And I think that this is very much like I was talking about yesterday, about how sometimes we'll get Facebook ads or things like that sent to help some charity in the rest of the world. Both charity and missionary work, we need to help around the world as people generally who are listening to this in the richer part of the world. And finally, it talks about the parable of the talents, or at least implies it, talking about how we need to each return to God the good things that we receive from Him. Thank you for listening to this episode of Vatican II in a Year. This is a listener-supported podcast. You're doing it to help StarQuest produce another great podcast at sqpn.com/give. You can give one-time monthly to join the StarQuest Patreon. Tomorrow, we're going to continue with the next paragraph of Apostolicum Axiositatem, which is paragraph 11, on the duties of one's family. Please join us then to learn more about Vatican II, which provide a blueprint for the Catholic Church. If you want more information, like playlists on individual documents and a reading plan, go to sgpn.com/Vatican, frmatthewlc.com/Vatican, or Vatican SGPN on Facebook and X. We also have an email for questions and comments, Vatican2@sgpn.com, and my own website, frmatthewlc.com, has a contact form.
Amen.